Welcome to the Brotherhood of Kings podcast, where we celebrate the brilliance, resilience, and power of Black men. And we empower them to shatter stereotypes, embrace their greatness, and create extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor. In this episode, I'm speaking with Reverend Kevin Ross, who is the Senior Minister of Unity of Sacramento International Spiritual Center. And we're going to explore the growing shift from organized religion to a more personal, love-based approach to spirituality. And I want to start by reading something I ran across a few days ago by the Pew Research Center, and it says, "The religious landscape of the United States continues to change at a rapid clip. In telephone surveys conducted in 2018 and 2019, 65% of American adults describe themselves as Christians when asked about their religion, which is down 12 percentage points over the past decade. Meanwhile, the religiously unaffiliated share of the population, consisting of people who describe their religious identity as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, now stands at 26%, up from 17% in 2009. Now, I believe there are two ways to look at this. First of all, the decline in church attendance and religious identity has led some to worry that without these traditional institutions, society may lose its moral compass. They argue that religious teachings provide a framework for ethical decision making, and without them, people may struggle to find meaning and purpose in their lives. That's one way to look at it. However, others see this shift as a positive transformation, an awakening rather than a decline. They believe that moving away from traditional religious institutions reflects a growing desire for a more personal and direct connection with the divine. Many who step away from organized religion still consider themselves deeply spiritual, engaging in meditation, mindfulness, and other personal practices that foster inner peace and moral integrity. They argue that morality is not exclusively tied to religious institutions, but can thrive through individual conscious empathy and a universal sense of interconnectedness. And this is where I bring in my guest, Reverend Kevin Ross, who is affectionately known as Rev Kev. Hello, Rev Kev. How are you?
Hello. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me. I really appreciate having an opportunity to spend some time with you and your viewers and listeners and readers and followers.
All right. So before we dive into our conversation, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself however you feel comfortable.
Introduce myself in any way I feel comfortable?
Yep.
Interesting you should bring that up. I have a way in which I introduce myself that is both formal and informal. So I'm going to share a way that I introduce myself. I'm going to have to bring it up right quick, but there's a way that I introduce myself that became very popular at Harvard that I think might be fun to share with you. And then it might open into some of what you read today in terms of our discussion. Let's see if you like this. I am a lot of things. I am the passion of Black Lives Matter and the poise of Gandhi's Namaste. I am my grandmama's hot water cornbread and my Jewish mother's unleavened bread. I am Morehouse and Harvard book smart and Chicago Southside street smart. I'm a globe-trotting universal human and one of the boys from the hood. I stand on the front lines challenging injustice against the marginalized and underserved, but I am first in line for reservations at a Michelin star restaurant for a 5-course meal. I am deeply upset with what my injustice my people face, and I'm positive that the future does not equal the past. I am Assalamu alaikum, Om Shanti, and good day, mate. I can dine with royalty and work with queens. I'm a stranger to no one and a brother to all. I hate what hurts my people, and I love everybody just the same. I worship no human, but I bow to any God everywhere and every God anywhere. I believe that we are all born worthy and there are no throwaway people. I am a Black optimist who has seen the worst of humanity, but somehow still believes that the best is yet to be. I'm Rev Kev, y'all. And that's my not so formal introduction.
Now, see, that's the way an introduction should be, because that spoke to the soul of who you are. I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
That was one of those Harvard assignments where we were invited to reveal our situatedness, but do so from the place of the sights, the sounds, the smells, the sensations, and the experiences that help to shape us. And so it was to come off the bio and come give a person access to those shaping influences that causes you to be you, you know? And so
Yeah,
that's where that comes from.
I absolutely love that. So now I want to get your thoughts about the Pew Report on the decline of organized religion and the rise of people who identify as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. So, do you see it as a decline in morality or an awakening of humanity?
It's a great question. Decline in morality or the awakening of humanity. I do think that we are on an evolutionary journey as human beings who are the inhabitants of spirit. And so the more we come into an awakening of our spiritual nature, the more our humanity gets to change. And I don't think that it is a death to morality. I do believe that the the shape and form and the how that people want to engage with their morality, engage with ways in which they encounter spirit. I think those forms are changing. I think people have redefined space. Okay. So, space once upon a time did look like these gargantuan cathedrals and these ornate physical locations. But we now live in a digital age where space is very personal and it's very borderless, but it also can fit in the palm of your hands. Now, one of the things as someone who leads a congregation, and I do understand these statistics very well, and I do know about the decline in attendance across America and 1,000 churches closing every year. Okay, just to put that in perspective, I have been able to observe that people still want community. They still want to explore their spirituality. They still want to have a deep dive in meaningful service in the world, but they want to determine what that space, time, and location looks like for them. It might be in an Iyanla Vanzant retreat. It might be at the Starbucks coffee shop, where a self-led group of folks who want to explore the topic of meditation do that. It might be online church, but it has changed. But our desire for connection, the exploration of our moral imagination, and the impact of service has not changed. Being herded into the masses of organized religion is not the generation that we are living in. That's a thing of the past.
Mm, yeah. So let's back up just a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
curious, when did you know you wanted to be a minister?
I think that when I answer that question, it's twofold. I think part of it was when it was recognized to me, which was as early as age 3, and then because I loved church. I grew up in Christ Universal Temple on the south side of Chicago with the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, and we had 3 services every Sunday. We were a big mega church, and I used to see all of my heroes and sheroes coming through as a kid, from Dr. Robert Schuller at the time to Les Brown to Della Reese and all. So those are my heroes and sheroes, these great orators and impactors of society, Jesse Jackson, you name it. I saw them all growing up. And so I would leave church and come home and stand on a crate in my backyard and play church. So people would see me as a 3-year-old preaching to my playmates in the backyard, playing church, because that's what I loved. I would be there for 3 services every week, and eventually would come out of Sunday school when I was about 4 years old and sit in the adult service throughout the whole thing and not flinch. So that's the beginnings. Then around 14, my grandfather saw that I was really engaged in service work in the community. I brought to the attention of our community this dangerous intersection where kids were being hit because there was no stop sign. So I petitioned and got a stop sign put in our neighborhood when I was in my early, I think 15 or 16 years old. My grandfather said, Rev, Kev, you really have some gifts that would be good for the community. I think you'd make a good minister. So we kind of planted the seed. And then when I went the motivational speaking route after being touched and inspired by Les Brown, who was a personal mentor, and I started tag team youth motivational speaking duo known as the Brothers of Thunder with my buddy, who is now Dr. David Montgomery. Both of us went to Morehouse College, and we would crisscross the nation giving these high-powered, impactful motivational speaking experiences for our peers. And one Sunday, we were actually speaking at a church, Dr. Barbara King's church in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was doing my thing, and the Spirit grabbed hold of me. And I said the following statement. I said, don't confuse me with a preacher, because that's not my heart's desire. But when you're a truth student, you can't help but speak the right stuff. Now, what I was really doing at that moment was struggling with my calling. And I was in public being convicted right on the spot that you could see the difference between my colleague who was a motivational speaker, and you could see that I was a minister in the making. Morehouse College, then, of course, being there, studying with, the protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and being in that great arena helped to completely uncover it. And around the age of 19 is when I yielded to that calling. Yeah.
So you've been around New Thought, per se, all of your life?
Yes. Yes. Okay. From birth.
I'm curious because, I was brought up Baptist, and I'm sure you understand the fundamentalist teachings of, other religions. Mm-hmm. And I know that I get a lot of pushback from, let's just say, fundamentalist thinkers, if you will.
Yes.
Because of how I think, how I see the world through the teachings of unity. Yeah. So I'm curious, what challenges have you faced in promoting this New Thought, love-centered approach in communities where they may be more fear-based? Do you have any challenges there?
Well, certainly in my pre-seminary program at Morehouse College, where I sat as one preparing to go to seminary with folks from more traditional mainline Christian backgrounds, where we had theological table talk and we sparred around our various theological and philosophical points of view. Oh, they came for me. They really came for me. But what set me apart is that part of our tradition was about manifesting. And so the things that I was defending in my theological point of view, I was also manifesting simultaneously, whether that was putting myself through Morehouse College and talking about how I tie that to our understanding of God as the source of our supply, or whether that being talking about being an inclusive type of leader, and then manifesting the first diaconate at the King Chapel from all of the historically Black colleges and universities in the Atlanta University Center. So I attracted 100 student deacons who are men, women, and from different backgrounds at Morehouse. And so for me, I've taken those hits, but I've been respected because I demonstrate what we teach. It's not just theory. You can look at it and say, wow, he's doing it. And so, and I can name names of some of the people who were my classmates who are very prominent leaders in their own right today. And we now respect each other today. We may not hang, but we give each other props for who we are in the world.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of that, I'll say recently, but you actually went to Harvard to continue your growth, if you will. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Part of my work as a leader over the past 15 years in Sacramento has involved my activism in social change. I really believe that it's not just enough to talk about peace, but it's important to build peace and to remove the barriers to peace. And so challenging systems that would be barriers to that peace has been a big part of my work. So that may have me look like I'm addressing the maltreatment of unarmed African-American men and their relationship with law enforcement, having something to say about that, or speaking out about the legalization of marijuana, not because I was a big fan of the legalization of marijuana, but because it would relieve individuals who were wrongfully sentenced for that and remove them from the prison industrial complex, or whether it be going to the U.S.-Mexico border to say that we want to stop the separation of children from their parents in an unjust, immigration system. So I have found the through line between what we teach and the ways in which we engage socially. And after a big inflection point in our city in Sacramento, after the murder of Stephon Clark, which was one of the longest campaigns that I've been a part of in terms of addressing the disease of racism, addressing the trauma of a community. I was beginning to wonder what additional tools could I use to be effective? Because part of protesting is important, speaking out is important, but I need to have some longer thoughts, some time and space to just really think things through. And so I took an educational sabbatical to go back to get more tools. And I was fortunately accepted in a Master of Religion and Public Life program at Harvard, which put me together with a cohort of individuals who are also mid-career professionals from a variety of different backgrounds that then allowed us to have this cross-sector engagement as we looked at how do we then make a more lasting impact of change in our society. So it's one thing to do it when you're only talking within your individual silo, but what happens when you bring together the tech world with the faith leaders? And what happens when you bring the faith leaders together with folks who are engaged in military service? And what happens when you bring those folks together with actors from the marketing world and the advertising world? We just had this incredible cohort that were able to think long thoughts together and cross-pollinate each other's ideas in order to attack some of the things that the structural barriers to what we refer to as just peace.
Yeah. Now, see what I love about you and this movement, if you will, this new thought movement, is the action that you're
Mhm.
taking, applying the principles that I believe Jesus taught us, right? And so
Yes.
you're talking about activism, you're talking about bringing people together from the tech communities, the different, and it's all about bringing humanity together. And so, with that being said, I want to just kind of dive into a couple of teachings of unity. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with the unity teachings, we're going to talk about some of the beliefs, if you will. But I have this question for you, Rev Kev. It says,
Mhm.
I have a few friends who aren't necessarily atheists, but their argument is, why should they embrace the teachings of a white Jesus? They say, this is one of the primary reasons they don't follow Christianity. What would you say to those guys?
I would agree 100%. There is no white Jesus. So I think immediately we want to dispel that false notion. I think what we were presented, particularly in the United States and certainly people of color, were presented what was called the slave Bible. And the slave Bible was this Bible, that redacted any of the empowering truths that would speak to individuals who had been kidnapped and captive and placed in an oppressive condition and servitude. So those things that would empower us were redacted, and the presentation from Jesus, the presentation about Jesus was, you know, um, whitewashed, right? And what remained in that Bible were the passages about slave be obedient to your masters and all of that kind of rhetoric and pie in the sky when you die in the sweet by and by, but not here and now. And so, yeah, I completely understand those individuals who are rejecting the trumped up, you know, version of Jesus through the lens of white supremacy. I am 100% in agreement with those individuals who reject that. I think there are other doors through which people can walk where truth is being told. And presentations of Jesus are not so otherworldly that they're not connectable to people who look like you and me, where you can find a Jesus who is, as Howard Thurman would write, Jesus and the disinherited, who would align himself um, with the oppressed, whose message was one of love and one of liberation and of justice. That Jesus is found in that same book, but it's the redactionism and the manipulation of the ancient text in order to uh, promote a system of oppression, particularly to people who look like you and me, that would cause people to both be rejectionists of Christianity and or religion altogether, since that is the dominant, you know, religious expression in the United States.
Yeah, yeah. So again, I just want to dive into just a couple of unity principles here.
Sure.
And as a former atheist, one thing that kept me from believing in God was this idea that God was this old white guy sitting in heaven somewhere, taking notes of my life and waiting for me to die and get to heaven. And then he would judge me based on whether or not I believed in his son. And if I didn't, I would be banished to a burning hell for eternity. Now, this made absolutely no sense to me. And it was the primary reason I didn't believe in God. So, what does unity teach about God?
Unity teaches what we would call the three omnis to begin with. The omnipresence of God, that God is everywhere, evenly present. The omnipotence of God, that God is all the power that there is. Um, and the omniscience of God, that God is all the intelligence that there is that governs the universe and is simultaneously available in all and through all, irrespective of form. God is everywhere evenly present. God is not an absent God, but God is present. We teach that God is indwelling as well as transcending. Transcending meaning is beyond the limitations of form. So, but immanent, meaning alive and active and the animating force in all of sentient life. So this is a fundamental teaching about God where unity is concerned.
Got it. Now, another thing that I couldn't wrap my head around when I was as a Baptist was this idea that I was taught that, Jesus was the Son of God. And on the other hand, I was taught that Jesus was God and the source of all the miracles. And it confused me. I couldn't make sense of that from the Baptist teaching. So can you share what unity teaches about Jesus?
We teach that Jesus is the great example and not the great exception. We teach that the Christ is God's idea of God's self in humanity or in man, and the Christ is the true offspring of the divine. The Christ is the Son of God. That Christ is not limited by gender, but it is God's idea of God's self as divine in the human form. We teach that Jesus teaches us how to activate the Christ potential within all of us and spent his life as a teacher, calling us toward our own divine nature and divine expression, and was often disappointed after he taught that we still had such little faith in ourselves. He continued to challenge us to rise to the height of that divinity. Peter sees Jesus walking on water, so to speak, and Jesus said, Peter wants to do it. He said, come on out here, Peter. Why? Because he saw within Peter the same qualities that he saw within himself. And so the Christ is the divine sonship, the divine oneship, the divine source and center in every human being. That's how we look at it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss the part where Peter actually did walk on water at the beginning.
He did do it.
Yeah,
he did do it according. Yeah.
So,
and whether that, let me just say for the skeptic, whether that be historical or whether that be metaphorical or metaphysical, the idea with Jesus is seeing our equality within the divine. That is the point.
Yes. Yes. Now, again, as an atheist, another issue I had with organized religion was this whole idea of sin. So I was taught that I was born a sinner and the only way to heaven was to repent of my sins and accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior because he had died for my sins. Now, thinking rationally, even as a teenager, I remember thinking, how could Jesus have died for my sins if I hadn't even been born yet and and hadn't committed any sin? So it was really confusing when I would try to get the minister to help me understand that concept. So what does unity teach about sin?
Sin is separation from God. Sin is separation, that activity that separates us from our divine nature. Okay, so it is falling short. It's missing the mark. Literally, using the archery term, when you draw a bow and arrow, and you're trying to aim at something, and if you miss, you sin. In the collective consciousness, sin is that which causes us to see ourselves as separate and different. So you can say that sin is separation separation from God, separation from all that is good in our fellow men and ourselves, or our fellow humans and ourselves. It is missing the greater idea of love, that the unifying, harmonizing principle that governs the universe. Okay, and so we also challenge notions of a binary God, this rewarder and punisher. That's more reflective of the personality of human beings, less of how we interpret God, which we also see God as principle. And so principle has a way of functioning irrespective of its user. And so when we are operating in harmony with universal laws, then there is benefit and blessing. And when we are operating in a contrary fashion to those universal laws, then there's often destruction and harm that is done. I can take fire, I can warm the building with it. I can also take fire, I can burn down the building with it. In one way, I'm operating harmoniously, in another way. And so the idea is to understand what the basis for right thinking is. And when I'm operating with the basis of right thinking, which is love of God, love of all that is good in our fellow humans and in ourselves, then there's less of a tendency for me to feel the need to operate outside of that space of love, which is, our ideal nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for sharing those insights. Again, because those are just a few of the things that caused me to not believe in God. And it wasn't until I, went on my own spiritual journey and found my truth, which a lot of it I find in unity, that again, I was able to create what I'll call an intimacy and connection to that which is greater than myself. And I think ultimately that's what we're striving for. And based on what the Pew report was saying, I personally believe it is an awakening. I think people are really hungry for that intimacy and connection with something greater than themselves without having to put a label on it. Because I think more than anything, it's the feeling. It's the feeling that we can attain when we connect to the infinite. You can't grab it up here. You got to get it in here, because I know that was one of the things that kept me from connecting to God, because I tried to process God in my head.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I got in my heart and
Yes.
allowed myself to feel the love of God that I was able to connect to that which is greater than myself. Now, not only are you a minister, but you're also a life coach. And I'm curious, in what ways do you integrate life coaching principles into your ministry and vice versa?
Interesting. Well, I can only give my consciousness. So I'm only going to offer what I am. And so I bring a practical approach to what it is that I do in the pulpit, because I believe that people are looking for practical solutions. I believe that people need principles and creative approaches to solving problems that they have, but also creating an abundant and joy-filled life of purpose, passion, peace, and prosperity. And so one of the things that a good coach does is engages his coachee in powerful questions. And so I am always bringing a powerful question so that individuals can be introspective and look within to find answers in the heart. So that's one of the ways I do it. Powerful questions. One of them might be, what are you pretending not to know? What are you pretending not to know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, how has writing books like The Optimist Seed, which you wrote, enhanced your ability to convey insights about finding personal truth outside traditional religious frameworks?
So The Optimistic Seed is really a story that I wrote as a way of supporting children who were being frightened by the pandemic and
Mm,
were suddenly having to be sheltered in place. And the world, as they knew it, was shutting down. They couldn't go to school. And so I wrote a couple of children's books at that time because I wanted to bring back something that helped me as a child when I was frightened. And that was a loving adult reading out loud to a child. My mother used to read out loud to me at night, bedtime stories, and it would soothe me tremendously. And so I created a campaign called Shelter in Place and Read Out Loud, and we raised lots of money to give books away to children. And the Optimistic Seed is a story designed to encourage little ones to take the journey from being an acorn to a mighty oak, and helping them to understand some of the challenges that they may face along the way in getting to become this mighty oak, the fulfillment of their potential. So it's a fun story. And in a sneaky way, it is my autobiography in poetry. It's a very simple, if I had to put my autobiography in a poetic way, I'm Acorn, and it tells of my journey encoded through
nice,
poetry and imagery and all that.
nice. Now, as a man who happens to be Black,
Mm-hmm.
for most of my life, I've received a lot of pushback from Black folk because of my optimism. And interestingly enough, I think one of the things that also attracted me to Unity was this sense of optimism, this sense of possibility. Okay. So I'm curious from your perspective as a man who happens to be Black, what strategies do you recommend for brothers out there who are striving to achieve their dreams amidst societal challenges and may not be so optimistic? What strategy would you recommend?
First of all, I would share with them how I derive my strength and sense of optimism. I consider myself a tough-minded optimist, and I I link that optimism actually to our ancestors. I link that to their cosmological presence that's still with us, uh, and that's still a part of my life today. But for their optimism, I would not be able to enjoy the success that I have. In fact, this day that we're living in now, even with all of its challenges, would not be possible but for the optimism and the defiant joy and the unbroken resilience of a cross generational relay race of successive optimists who believed in the power of something so much bigger than our circumstance. They believed us out of enslavement. They believed us out of Jim Crow. They believed us out of um, so many oppressive conditions. And that optimism. So that's the river that runs through my blood as it relates to optimism, not satisfaction. I'm not satisfied with the conditions that our people face. As I said in my earlier notes, I'm not satisfied with it, and I can say that plainly and still maintain my optimism from the point of view that I am responsible for opening a path for generations that are coming behind me.
Mm,
And because this earth is round, what is the future I want to project and create for them? So there, we can move all over the planet if we want to. We can do that. There's no place on this planet that has not been affected by colonialism and white supremacy. And so I counter that by saying I have a right to exist in joy and abundance and freedom. And I have gifts, talents, skills, and abilities that when I bring together with other people who look like me, who think like me, who care about the things I care about, we can create tremendous transformation. And we have. But for our ancestral optimism, the United States would still have conditions where we're in chains. You know what I mean? So I look at it in a very, look at it comprehensively. And I don't look at it from the point of view of Pollyanna. I don't spiritually bypass, and I don't, mince words about what's going on. I think part of the problem with folks who do adopt teachings like this is they put on rose-colored glasses and they overlook serious and chronic issues of suffering. And I don't think you have to do that in order to see beyond it. This is what Dr. King's dream was about. But he contrasted it. If you remember the I Have a Dream speech, it started out talking about, before he got into the visionary and the lofty and all the things, he was describing a shameful condition in the United States that he had a vision for bringing us beyond.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, Dr. King spoke of the beloved community.
Yes.
How important is it specifically for Black men to have that beloved community of like-minded individuals who not only embrace optimism, but are also, as you just mentioned, committed to making a difference in the world? How important is having that community?
I think it's beyond, it's urgent and important. It's urgent and it's essential. I think having safe, brave spaces where Black men can pull apart without any filters, without the need to code switch, without the pressures of living up to any standard that society may have for us, and unburden ourselves just for what it means to live in this society right now. I think that's important. So the just a safe, brave space to unburden, but then opportunities to collaborate and to dream and to envision and to exchange ideas and to enrich each other's lives. I don't. There is, when people tell me I don't know any good Black men, I'm like, well, I don't know anything but good Black men. I'm telling you right now, from my two baby brothers, Timmy and Mikey, to my guys who I spend the closest time with, Saad and Eric, and I can go. Of course, I'm from the greatest fraternity on planet Earth, Morehouse College. So it has been essential, and it's certainly been essential to my success, and it continues to nurture and nourish my spirit. And I commend you for creating a space for us.
Now, as we begin to wind down, I want to see, or just ask you, so in the broadest sense, what is your vision for the future of spirituality? Just again, from the Rev Kev's bird's eye view in terms of spirituality and what's happening on the planet. What's your vision for the future of spirituality?
It is unshackled by wrong traditions. It is set free to be self-led. It is responsible for ending racism and all the isms that we tend to face in our society. It is remixed in such a way that the forms that of expression that we start to witness look foreign to us, and builds in us a curiosity about how we might be carriers of our own spirituality. Maybe there are other ways in which we can show up. Mm-hmm. It is something that's within our grasp, but it is also something that we will continue to strive for. It will be the thing that calls us up and out of our current evolutionary stair step to moving from being, Homo sapiens sapien to Homo universalis, where we will become so conscious of our oneness with all people, our oneness with all life. And I'm excited to see how that shows up in the music. I'm excited to see how that shows up in the media. I'm excited to see how that shows up in art, but also in business and in culture, and the ways in which we start seeing it influenced in society. Mm.
Mm. So I'm going to assume that's an optimistic point of view that you have there, my friend.
I would say it's a dangerous point of view.
Okay.
In that it threatens old systems. Old systems are not safe in the presence of this supernova of spirituality. Something will erupt, and this new wine cannot be contained in those old wineskins, is what I'm trying to say.
Got it.
And so whatever that looks like, that's what I am summoning with my, spiritual imagination, my moral imagination, with my limited point of view.
Got it. So now I want to give you an opportunity to tell the audience how they can reach you if they want to check out what your work, what you're preaching. Just here's an opportunity to do your little commercial. How can people find you?
Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time to do this with me. I really admire you, and I admire what you're building. And you're building something good. You're building something for us. So I just want you to know I really appreciate that. If people want to experience me in person, they can visit unityofsacramento.org and plan your visit. There's a tab on the website that says plan your visit, so that we can be ready for you when you decide to come to visit with us in person in Sacramento, if you decide to do that. If you are interested in learning more about the products and services that I have to offer, my books and speaking and coaching and all that, you can go to kevinrossnow.com, kevinrossnow.com. And everything's there. It's all laid out, and a lot of your questions can be easily asked. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. That's there. I've got some other announcements that are kind of not ready, but maybe by the time this is out, you'll be able to check out a new podcast that's being released called Meet the Game Changers. It'll be a lot of fun. You'll get to connect with some innovators, but that's a sizzle. And then if you want to support the global works that I do, including the work around literacy and pipeline from the pipeline from the inner cities into the HBCUs and stuff like that, then check out my foundation, the Kevin Ross Force for Good Foundation. It's a non-for-profit organization that's really aimed at empowering the next generation of innovators, creatives, and leaders, for the better.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it has been my absolute honor having you on the podcast. And now I want to give you an opportunity, just any closing thoughts you'd like to close out with.
I think in this moment, it's important for people to take a step back and remember that you are not powerless to change the world that you live in. I know right now for so many people are afraid, so many people are panicking, so many people are losing their joy. And if you can hold on to anything, hold on to your right to joy. Joy was there with the abolitionists. Joy was there with those that marched on Washington. Joy was there with those that crossed the bridge at Selma. Joy was there with the women's movement. Joy was there with the children's movement. Joy is always present. We cannot yield to this seemingly oppressive condition, our joy. It is the transformative element that we all have a right to possess. And so I invite you to do some joy cotton in these challenging times and know that that joy will lead you to the change that you are uniquely equipped and called to make in the world today.
Mm. Peace. Joy, joy, joy. Well, Rev Kev, I just want to say thank you for shining your light, my brother. And I love how the universe works, how the universe brought us together. You mentioned that you know a lot of good Black men. Well, that makes two of us, and you're definitely one of those good Black men that I look up
You're
to.
one of them. Hey, you're right there. Right there. Takes one to know one.
So I appreciate you. And again, I'm just grateful that, we're on the same team. And God has brought us together to shine our light throughout the world to make it a little bit brighter. So again, thank you for everything that you're doing.
And the same to you. Thank you so much. And thanks to all your viewers and listeners and followers.
All right. So this has been another episode of the Brotherhood of Kings podcast. And until next time, stay true, stand tall, and walk boldly in your kingship, because authentic masculinity is power with purpose. Until next time, stay royal.